So, what's the best Canon camera for you? Canon cameras are known for being easy to use and have amazing colors, but with hundreds of cameras to choose from, it can get more than a little confusing. So, we're gonna look at the best ones for a casual hobbyist, all the way to cameras for a serious pro. And some of these cameras might surprise you. Now, I want to start this list off with the most accessible and easy to pick up camera from Canon before we get into the crazier cameras on this list. So I quickly want to mention the Canon T7. This is the most affordable camera that you can get for photography. It has a 24 megapixel high resolution sensor, but it's not a very fast camera. It only shoots 3 frames per second in RAW or JPEG, which is really only fast enough for casual or hobby use. The autofocus in photo mode is pretty accurate and quick. As a beginner or casual shooter, you will have zero issues. Now, the video in the Canon T7 is pretty mediocre, and I genuinely don't want to bore you guys with it. Honestly, you're gonna get better results from your iPhone 10 or iPhone 12. What I really like about this camera is the robust DSLR style body. It's rugged, simple to use, it's intuitive, like an Apple product. I just love the feel of this camera. It makes me feel like I'm using a proper camera. If you're someone on a budget that doesn't want to spend too much money, but you still want the look of a proper camera, the Canon T7 is a great option. But chances are a lot of you guys probably want a high-end camera that makes you feel like you can really get creative without having technical limitations. One of the best cameras that you can possibly pick up right now is the Canon M6 Mark II. The M6 Mark II is a wild camera. This is currently the highest resolution compact camera on the market. It has a whopping 32 megapixel sensor, which is on par, if not better, than most professional cameras that cost $2K or more. And that's because it has the same sensor and internal technology as the Canon 90D, which is a professional camera. This is enough resolution for any type of pro level work like weddings, corporate work, fashion, and even product photography. And as a casual shooter, you're going to get more than enough detail in your photos and videos with an extra boost in quality. And this camera is fast. It shoots 14 frames per second in photo mode, 4K video with no crop, plus HD video at 120 frames per second for 5 times slow motion. There is almost nothing else that you could possibly want in this camera, except for maybe cinema profiles, but that's something that Canon usually reserves for their higher end pro cameras. In addition, it also has the really speedy and accurate dual pixel autofocus technology, which works really well in both photos and video, which makes shooting more enjoyable and takes out a lot of the technical hassle that comes with cameras. One quick note though guys, while this camera does shoot at 14 frames per second, 14 frames per second for photo mode is ridiculous and it's faster than really any other pro camera out there. One thing to note is that the autofocus in this camera cannot keep up with 14 frames per second, and often you're going to get 1 or 2 photos out of focus. That's not because the autofocus system isn't good, it's simply because the camera is way too fast. So something to be aware of. And I really dig the compact body. The M6 will easily fit in your jacket or backpack. It's like having a professional DSLR in your pocket. But it does lack a lot of the design elements that you would find in a professional camera, like a side articulating screen, a bigger battery life, dual audio jacks, so there is plenty of reason to get a professional DSLR or a professional mirrorless camera. So don't worry, we'll have this stuff later in this list. As we say, I've got you covered. Now, before we move on to the professional pro cameras, there is one more camera that I have to mention to you guys. I feel like I'll get into a lot of trouble with the Canon community if I don't talk about the Canon M50 Mark I and Mark II. These are both amazing HD cameras specifically for vlogging and content creators. And it's pretty easy to see why. Both cameras have a lightweight and compact body that's easy to hold while vlogging or making any other type of content. The ergonomics and design of this camera is simple and intuitive, kind of like an Apple product, which makes this camera a breeze to use, and because of its size, it's easy to pretty much take anywhere with you. And this camera again has a 24 megapixel sensor that does deliver high quality photos and video. It is almost the same sensor as the Canon T7. This is easily good enough for casual hobby shooting, even mid-level pro work like corporate videos or weddings. The main difference between the Canon T7 and the M50 is not the sensor, it's really the image processor. The M50 is going to give you cleaner images, better video quality, and an overall lower noise floor. And for the nerds out there, it does shoot 10 raw frames per second and full HD from 24 to 60 frames per second with an optional mode for 120 frames per second, but it only shoots that at 720p. So if you want that slow motion, you have to drop down in resolution. The M50 now does have 4K, but it comes with a massive 1.6 times crop, which in my opinion completely destroys the quality of 4K. I would not use this as a 4K camera. If you do want a 4K camera, I recommend spending a little bit more and picking up the Canon 90D or the M6 Mark II or the Sony ZV-E10 if you're a trader. The Canon dual pixel autofocus is fast and accurate in both photo and video mode. It does take quite a performance hit in 4K mode, but like I said earlier, it's simply not a 4K camera. If you're an HD content creator or a vlogger, this camera is such a good option for you. Also, a quick side note, if you are a vlogger or HD content creator, but you want a small point and shoot camera instead of a bigger mirrorless or DSLR camera, I do recommend looking into the G7X Mark II and Mark III. The Mark II has an amazing lens that goes from 24 to 100 millimeters. This is all the lens that you will ever need as a vlogger, plus it's really good in low light. And if you want 4K with external audio, you can pick up the Mark III instead. For a little bit more, you get a whole lot more horsepower. Alright guys, so finally let's get into the big boy or big girl cameras. These cameras are meant for pros, but don't necessarily cost an absurd amount of money. I sincerely believe in getting the most for my money. And the first camera I want to talk about is the Canon 90D. This is the camera that I recommend the most often to enthusiasts and professionals who want to specifically shoot Canon DSLR. And it's pretty easy to see why. Canon DSLRs are pieces of art when it comes to design and technology. It's got a robust grip that simply makes this camera feel amazing in the hands. The button layout and ergonomics are designed to make your life easier, and one of my favorite features about this camera, or really any Canon DSLR, is the LCD right on top so that you can see all of your settings at a glance. Using this camera is kind of like driving a high-end sports car. Once you use it, it's pretty hard to go back. It has the same sensor as the Canon M6 Mark II, which is a 32 megapixel APS-C size sensor, and it delivers a slightly slower 11 frames per second while shooting photos, but it has the same 4K at 30 frames per second uncropped with HD video at 120 frames per second, and naturally it still has that same speedy and super accurate dual pixel autofocus. The autofocus on the 90D has intelligent face and object tracking. The joystick on the back can actually help you switch between different faces and objects, which is really helpful when you're shooting weddings or interviews. Plus, I love the side articulating screen on this camera along with the very long battery life. Also, if you need a budget option, you can also pick up the Canon 80D with only a few small drawbacks like the lack of 4K and HD at 120 frames per second. Alright guys, so finally, we are at the best camera on this list. The big guy, the big gal, the big dog, the El Presidente. But here's the thing. Most people at this point on the list would just be like the Canon R5 because it is the most expensive and the best performing camera Canon has. But here's the thing. Canon is already spending millions of dollars telling you guys to buy their super expensive camera. What I want to talk to you guys about is what is the best camera you can get for the least amount of money? And for me, that camera has to be the Canon EOS R. This is part of Canon's new mirrorless lineup. It gives you the exact same specs as their best performing DSLR, which is the Canon 5D Mark IV. It has a full frame 30 megapixel sensor that shoots photos at 8 frames per second and full HD video at 60 frames per second. It does have 120 frames per second, but you have to drop down to 720p. Something to note is that the sensor in this camera is almost twice as big as every other camera on this list. The bigger sensor allows you to collect more light, thus giving you a cleaner image, more information, and making it easier to edit for professional use. The more light you have, the better your photos and videos are going to turn out. Plus, this camera does shoot 14-bit RAW for photos and has C-Log, which is a professional cinema level profile for video, which is a must-have for professional paid work. There is nothing in this camera that holds you back technology-wise from getting pro-level results, and you can do all of it while staying on a relative budget. Till next time guys, peace.